All right, welcome back to the show. Our focus now turns to college football, where Ryan Day and the Ohio State Buckeyes are the first champions of this current 12-team college football playoff. Went on a big run, entering as an 8 seed and winning 4 straight games by double digits. A reminder, that's wins over Tennessee, Oregon, Texas, and Notre Dame. It was the Buckeyes' first national championship since 2014. Here's how the schedule shakes out for a potential run at another. And even though they won the Natty, revenge will certainly be on their minds when they face Michigan in Ann Arbor, November 29th. All right, let's bring in Dave Biddle and Tom Fornelli. We've got coverage for talking about this Buckeyes team. Dave Biddle, of course, 24/7 Sports, has the lowdown in Columbus and Dublin, and Tom Fornelli from the Cover 3 podcast. Julian Sayin, a lot of hype coming around this transfer guy that was a former 5-star recruit. Dave, what's the word on the street in terms of his impact potentially, and is he in line to be the starter? What's the lowdown there?
Yeah, I'll be very surprised if he's not the starter. And, really the vibe around here is that Julian Sayin is going to be a good quarterback for the Buckeyes. The question is when. I mean, he's just a redshirt freshman, barely played last year. I think he threw maybe 12 passes last year. The talent is there, but the question is, when is he going to be good? Because they opened the season, obviously, with Texas. They have a tough schedule overall. So will he be good right away against Texas in the opener? That's a lot to ask. Even C.J. Stroud, when he was a redshirt freshman, kind of struggled out of the gate a little bit. So I think it's probably more realistic to expect him to settle in later in the year at some point. And that's what Ohio State needs to hope is just this year he's a good starting quarterback, because with the weapons around him, a good starting quarterback is what they need. If he's great, that's wonderful for Ohio State. I think that's a lot to ask for a redshirt freshman, even a former 5-star like Julian Sayin.
Yeah, when you look at the situation with Julian Sayin, like, he's a former 5-star recruit and he's an Ohio State quarterback. So given the track record of quarterbacks at Ohio State over the last, 10, 15 years, he's probably going to be pretty good. But as Dave touched on, as a redshirt freshman without a ton of experience, there are going to be growing pains, or at least there typically are. And when you start the season with a game against Texas, another team that is considered one of the favorites for the national title in 2025, there are likely going to be some bumps in the road, and it's going to be very important to see how quickly he can get acclimated and get comfortable for Ohio State to be competing for the Big Ten and to get back to the college football playoff and to defend its national title.
Dave, if we get to the other side of the ball, defensive line potentially is an issue, but are reinforcements on the way?
The defensive line, they did a good job getting a couple guys at defensive end in the portal. They got Logan George from Idaho State. Yes, a big jump going from Idaho State to Ohio State, but he had a really good spring. They really like him. And then they got a really good transfer, in my opinion, Bo Atkinson from North Carolina. Here's the rub. Ryan Day flat out said that they were going to look for a defensive tackle in the portal. He did have the caveat, we're not just going to add someone just to add one. But he was not happy with the depth at D-tackle leaving spring, and they were not able to find a defensive tackle in the portal. So now they're relying on the guys that they weren't really thrilled about coming out of spring as the top backups. They like their projected starters at defensive tackle with Caden McDonald and Edric Houston, but they don't like the depth there, and they were not able to add a D-tackle in the portal to help out.
I will say, Dave, I've always heard the phrase, actions speak louder than words. And Ryan Day's words said we need more depth along the defensive tackle position. But the fact they didn't go out and get one while they added a couple guys at defensive end makes me think that maybe they're a little more comfortable with that position than they're letting on. But I certainly understand why there is a concern, because when you look at all the players that they had to replace on their defensive line, there is a lack of experience. There is not a lack of talent. Ohio State has done a very good job of recruiting and developing talent on the lines of scrimmage for years. And I would expect that while we may not see the overall potential or the performance of the line we saw last season with so many veteran players on it, I do think there is a high upside to the unit that they have. I do think that Edric Houston and Caden McDonald, who are likely to be the starters, as you said, Dave, will probably get the majority of snaps and probably be the quote-unquote stars. But I do think we'll see a lot of guys rotating in, and it should be by the end of the season, when they need to be at their best, they should be rounding into form. So I still like the spot for the Buckeyes going forward.
If we move a couple levels down, who's going to be paired up with Caleb Downs, Dave, when it's all said and done, you think?
Yeah, I think it'll probably be Jalen McClain, a rising sophomore. Also in the mix is Malik Hartford. That was like the one battle in spring that was really the really only open spot on defense, in my opinion, in spring, was those guys fighting to be the starter opposite Caleb Downs. I think it'll be Jalen McClain. He flashed as a true freshman last year. I thought he outplayed Malik Hartford in the spring, but it's a close battle. Those guys will continue to battle. It gives them good depth, whoever loses that battle. Again, I think it'll be Malik Hartford who loses that battle, then becomes your top backup safety. So I think it'll be Jalen McClain. He's a guy, he's got speed, he's got toughness, young man from Jersey. Wasn't very highly ranked, but came in right away, even though he was not an early enrollee enrollee and really turned some heads last year as a true freshman. Didn't play much, but still got on the field a little bit. So I think it'll be Jalen McClain as a sophomore.
Yeah, if Dave's saying it's going to be Jalen McClain, I'm going to follow Dave's lead and say it'll probably be Jalen McClain. But the one thing I'm wondering is Matt Patricia has taken over at defensive coordinator at Ohio State. We have seen in the past at the NFL level that Patricia's kind of gone with some 3 safety looks. So whether it's McClain, whether it's Hartford, I'm guessing both are going to see plenty of snaps. He's probably going to use Caleb Downs as somewhat of his queen as a chess piece, move him around the board, put him in different spots based on certain matchups. And I think we could see both. But question I have for you, Dave, if I can go off script here, is I've heard good things about freshman Fahim Delane. What have you heard about him in camp so far this year?
Yes, I've been talking him up as well. I think he'll be on the 2 deep right away as a true freshman, Tom. I'm glad you brought him up. He came in, a young man that they were very high on to begin with, one of the top safety recruits in the country. He came in ready to roll physically, mentally. I think he'll be that next guy on the 2 deep, and maybe he'll end up being the top backup. I think he'll be the second top backup, so to speak. But yeah, Fahim Delane's a guy that'll definitely be a player here at Ohio State.
Great follow-up there, Tom. Let's get to Ryan Day. And it's interesting because we have 2 lenses, right? We have Dave with the local lens, and then obviously Tom nationally, so that's podcast, message boards, the whole like. Because after Ohio State won the national championship, there were still some yeah buts out there, mostly from those in Ann Arbor. Yeah, but you lost to Michigan. So what's it going to take for Ryan Day to maybe shed some of that, if he's still getting some of that, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Ohio State fans are not going to be happy if he goes up to Ann Arbor and they lose for a 5th consecutive time to their arch rivals. But winning the national championship did buy him more time. Like, there's no way he would get fired for losing to Michigan this year. That being said, he'd love to get that monkey off his back, especially now that he, won the big prize. And, if you're an Ohio State fan out there, I'm sure I don't speak for everybody, but I think most Ohio State fans, maybe 99%, as much as that Michigan loss stung, you would take a national championship and a loss over a Michigan rather than beat that Michigan team last year and not win the national championship. Now, obviously, Ohio State fans want both. I think this year, you got to temper your expectations a little bit if you're an Ohio State fan. I think the expectation should be compete for a Big Ten championship, beat Michigan, make the college football playoff, see where the chips fall. This is not a natty or bust season like they were saying it was last year, which that really puts a target on your back. You already have a target on your back when you're Ohio State. When you're saying natty or bust, it worked out. But yeah, his job is certainly not on the line. I mean, winning the national championship, Buckeye fans are really, really behind him now. But you can't lose too many straight to Michigan. I do think they're going to go up there and get the job done this year, but who knows? I thought the same thing last year.
So we asked Tom to give us his schedule for the Buckeyes here. So, Tom, why don't you lay out the wins and losses and whether that involves a win against Michigan, which you do not have?
No, I do not. The way I look at it is if they couldn't beat Michigan last year, I'm not picking them to beat Michigan until they actually do. That was the worst Michigan team we'd seen in a long time, and I think that the Wolverines will be improved. But I think overall, you look at how I have the schedule breaking out. You start that game with Texas, you finish with Michigan. I have them losing both and winning all 10 games in between. That should still be good enough to get you into the Big Ten championship game. That will definitely be good enough to get them into the playoff. And hey, you can argue losing that game to Michigan last year kind of woke them up and got their attention and helped lead them on that run through the college football playoff. So maybe losing to Michigan at the end of the year wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for this Buckeyes team going forward.
That was their recipe for success last year, is exactly what Tom is laying out here. If they can go 10-2, including, oh gosh, I can't believe I'm saying this, with the loss to Michigan, that's the recipe for them to win the national championship in this new age of college football. It almost feels like college basketball to me, where if you're like a Duke or North Carolina fan, it's like, man, you could lose to Duke if you're a North Carolina fan like 3 times, including the ACC championship game. If you beat them in the tournament, you win the national championship, you're feeling great. It's just crazy what's happened with college football, but I like it. It's exciting. Yeah, this is a tough schedule. At Illinois is a game not a lot of people are talking about. That'll be tough. Illinois is really good last year. They'll be better this year. That's a tough place for Ohio State to play at Illinois. Washington, I think, is going to be good. They have to go at Washington, of course, the leadoff game with Texas. They'll host Penn State and then at Michigan. It's a tough schedule, my friends.
It certainly is indeed. I just remember working NFL Sundays, getting ready after the Michigan loss, ready for some Ryan Day breaking news. It never happened. And then Dave goes on a nice heater covering this team, 4 straight wins to the Natty. All right, guys, certainly appreciate it. Dave Biddle and Tom Fornelli with an eye on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Check out Dave's stuff on 24/7 Sports. And Tom, of course, one of the 4 co-hosts of the Cover 3 podcast. Scan the QR code. Check them out however you listen to your podcast, and also, of course, on YouTube.